Okay, everyone, I'll make it 6 o'clock. I'm just going to start.
Can you hear me, Gareth?
Hello?
Paul Lewis here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Paul.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay, I'll just start the meeting, everybody. So, bear with me 1 second. So, hello, good evening, and welcome to the first meeting of the new Governance and Audit Committee. Before I start the agenda, please could I remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded live via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Could I ask all participants to mute their microphones when not speaking, and if someone wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. Also, please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function. So, moving to the first agenda item, which is appointment of chairman. Please could I ask for nominations, but bearing in mind that the chairman may be a real councillor or a lay member, but must not be a member of any group which is members on the executive. Please could I have nominations and seconders? Thank you.
Can I nominate Councillor George Carroll?
And do you have a seconder?
Second.
Any other nominations? Okay, on that basis then I declare that Councillor Carroll is appointed chairman for this municipal year. Thank you. Over to Councillor Carroll.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. If we move on to item 2 then, which is the appointment of a vice chairman. I think I'm right in saying, Gareth, that the same rules still apply. Can we have any nominations, please?
Yeah.
I'll nominate Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
And I'll second myself.
Okay, there being no other nominations, Councillor Rowlands is duly elected. Congratulations. If we move on to item 3 then, apologies for absence. Carry on.
Everyone's your chairman, so no apologies.
I thought everyone was here. I was just scrolling through. On to item 4 then, which is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 1st of March 2021. Do we have any questions or comments in relation to the minutes? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 443, page 538. It was noted that a public query relating to the statement of accounts for 2019-20 was still ongoing, and it was agreed for an update on this to be provided to the Audit Committee in May. I don't believe that that's on the agenda anywhere today. I'm just wondering if there is an update available or under what auspices it can be provided. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Anthony, did you want to come in there?
Yes. Councillor Johnson, we can provide an update today. What I would suggest is an item on the agenda. I think it's our annual audit summary. Within that report, it references the issue and the fact that we were able to give an opinion last year but not certify the accounts. It might make sense if the chair is okay with us for us to pick it up as part of that session, because there's a natural flow from that report itself, if that's okay with you.
I think I had a thumbs up from Councillor Johnson there. I'm content with that as well, Anthony. So if we proceed as set out there, any other questions or comments in relation to the minutes?
Paul Lewis here, Chairman. I don't know if you can see me here, but I got a comment. Under minute 436, which talks about the Local Government Elections Act, overview of audit committee implications, etc. Down towards the bottom of the page here, it mentions that Councillor Wilson suggested the setting up of a search committee to talk about the appointment of lay members for this committee and in the future. Is there any update on that? Do we know? Has that been taken forward by anyone?
Mark, I see you've got your hand up there.
Yes, Chair, I can pick that up. And item 9, because it's an item on the agenda in relation to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, so I can touch on that there if that's okay with
No
everyone.
problem. No problem. Yeah, I read the minutes earlier. I didn't see that point in there. Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. If we deal with that under item 9, then anybody else?
Move the minutes, Chair.
Okay, I'll second that. Duly moved. If we move on to the next item, then item 5, which is to receive declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? I will take that as a no. On to the main business then, item 6, the annual audit summary.
Good evening, Chair. I'll take that item with your permission. Thank you very much indeed for taking this evening, committee. This is the annual audit summary for 2020 that Anthony referenced a short while ago. The Auditor General for Wales has got a duty under the Local Government Measure of 2009 to look at our annual improvement assessment processes, and the Auditor General has to publish an annual report for each improvement authority, of which the Council is one, and that report seeks to outline whether the authority is likely to comply with our duty to secure continuous improvement. So you'll be familiar that we bring this report to you annually. The report that you've got covers all of the work undertaken by Audit Wales, as well as reflecting the work of Estyn and the Care and Social Services Inspectorate for Wales as well. And what it does is set out a position covering the period of August 2019 until the autumn of 2020. There's been some slight changes to the timing because of the coronavirus pandemic, but that's covered within the legislation the Welsh Government brought forward at the beginning of the pandemic. You'll be aware as a committee that as part of that work by our regulators, both locally and nationally, a series of recommendations or proposals for improvement are made. And as an authority, what we do with those improvement proposals and recommendations is incorporate them into an action tracker that is monitored on a monthly basis by the cross-departmental group called Insight. And that means that we're able to keep an eye on them on a monthly basis. And what we do is bring you a 6-month position statement in terms of where we are with those various improvement proposals or recommendations. And we also incorporate them into our annual report so that we use it as part of our self-assessment process in order to identify areas for improvement. Clearly, as a committee, you've got a key role in maintaining oversight in terms of the way that our responses go to this kind of work, and that's the reason for bringing it to you this evening. So Appendix A, Chair, to the report sets out Audit Wales's annual audit summary for the period of August 2019 to the autumn of last year. The report is generally positive and has concluded that we are meeting our statutory duties in terms of continuous improvement. As a committee, you've received as part of our regular reporting of Audit Wales work, the recommendations or proposals for improvement associated with the individual local studies, and they're summarised in the report for you. We haven't had any formal recommendations made in the period that this report covers, but we have had a series of local proposals for improvement, and they're being tracked, as I say, through the Insight tracker. As well as local work, Audit Wales undertake a series of national studies and they make recommendations or proposals for improvement. They are also incorporated into the Insight action tracker as well. So the process very much is that twice yearly we bring you this report in terms of a position statement on progressing that work. And then we bring it to you in the autumn as part of the annual self-assessment process. Individual reports are reported through to scrutiny committees, the audit committee, and then Insight Board, strategic leadership team and cabinet, so that's the kind of cycle to make sure that this work is monitored on an ongoing basis. I don't know whether perhaps Anthony, Chair, may wish to come in at that point to make any comments specifically on the work of Audit Wales.
Thanks, Tom. I would just say that this is it's a statutory report for us. We're obliged by legislation to sum up everything we do in the year. We've tried a little bit of a different format this year to try and make it really sharp, a little bit punchier, with reference and linkages within the report to the relevant reports that sit below the main messages. My take is that the Audit Committee will have seen most of these reports. If they haven't come directly to the Audit Committee, they will have gone to a relevant scrutiny committee. Like Tom said, all the recommendations are picked up within the tracker, so we're comfortable with that arrangement. And this is something that goes on our website as well. So this is a public document. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention. So just a summary capturing everything that we've done for that specific period.
Okay, thank you for that, Anthony. I'm assuming you'd concluded there, Tom, as well. With that in mind, if I open to questions from members, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom and Anthony. I think this is probably more directed towards Tom than Anthony. Obviously, it's been a very difficult period of time, and there's a lot of challenging, I think, recommendations within here. So I mean, there's a lot of amber, I think, on our, so on that Appendix B in terms of where we are. I think I'm quite pleased that some of the areas I feel quite closely engaged with, on planning and on looked after children seem to be completed. What seems to be a recurring theme within this, though, is the ability to turn, amber to green from a lot of the shared working and partnerships. And there's a lot here that referencing SRS, Shared Regulatory Services, or the Public Services Board, or working with Legacy Leisure. So I think that's going to be a progressive theme, both of tonight's meeting and going forward, for the Governance and Audit Committee to be able to understand and see that work with us and external partners has the appropriate oversight and for delivery, and to ensure that those things get met, because it just feels to me there's a lot of acronyms in here with things that are waiting to be done, and that's natural. That's what you'd expect under these circumstances, for them to be the most challenging things to be completed, but they should still be completed. I don't know if there's any comments from Tom about how we're going to deal with that, both with this and going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Tom, if you want to come in there. If not, I'll go to Mr. Lewis.
I just say, Councillor Johnson obviously outlines the difficulties that we've been facing, and I think that there's a large number of proposals for improvement associated with the SRS, as you point out, Councillor. I think those services, leisure and SRS, have been particularly impacted over the last 15 months or so. I know that Dave Holland is now giving thought to the next year of the business planning cycle for the Shared Regulatory Service, and these things will be important parts of that work. And a sort of general comment, I suppose, that the Insight Board now is very much back in the kind of business as usual in terms of tracking these things on a monthly basis, in order that we do make the progress where we can, notwithstanding the pressures that the services continue to face.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. Mr. Lewis. Paul, I think you might be on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I say I've got a paper copy only of these minutes, of course, and where it says, for further report can be viewed here, pressing the paper doesn't do me much good, So where will I find these reports, and how would I be able to look at them? Because I tried this afternoon, I couldn't find them.
If I could come in there, Chair. Apologies, Paul. I think hopefully the links, the electronic links, will take you through to the Audit Wales website. But of course, the council will have copies of these reports, and if not, we can provide you with the relevant copies, hard copy, if that'll help.
Well, no, the point I'm making is not that necessarily I want to see the report, but as a lay member, I only get a paper copy. I can't join a link, you see what I mean? And, you know, I come back to this thing about making the lay member the chairman of the committee. You know, you need a bit more full rounding of it effectively than this, because, you know, anybody new coming into this job, because it won't be me, is not going to be given a piece of paper and saying press here, only presses the paper, nothing happens. That's just the point I'm making, that's all. If you're going to use a lay member as a chairman in future, you need to be more inclusive, is what I'm saying. Okay? That's all.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really, observations, really, on the Welsh scrutiny. I'm always interested in Welsh Audit's views on the Welsh scrutiny. I'm trying to look for best practice in different scrutiny committees, and I'm finding it a real struggle. So perhaps, Steve, if you've got any case studies I could utilise to look for good cases in other councils, not just in Wales, but in the UK, or if not abroad even, then perhaps maybe you could share them. That would be really useful.
I could come in there if I may, Chair. We did, if my memory serves me right, Tom might correct me, but I'm sure we did a report on the effectiveness of scrutiny in 2018, maybe 2019, Tom. And within that report, I'm sure there was reference to some good practice. Also, I'm sure on the back of that report, we set up some GPX work, good practice exchange work, looking at what worked well, potentially in other authorities. So I can try and access that for you, Councillor Wilson, and that'll hopefully shape some of your thinking, which is it's a very good question, actually, in terms of, because scrutiny works very differently and can be very variable across local authorities, but we can certainly do our best to try and pull something together for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's considering, especially, I know Welsh Government is looking much more at scrutiny as well. And and obviously they use their public accounts model much more in terms of the role of their scrutiny. And I know that there has been discussions before about using the public accounts model going forward in local government. I just wondered, have you got any moves in that direction? Bearing in mind we're setting up these new statutory committees, and yet again, there seems to be the issue of scrutiny there as well. And I think going forward, if we're looking at revising local government, and certainly the influence I'm getting is that if we increase the size of the assembly, it should not be at the expense of reducing the powers of local government. And that's a real concern a lot of councillors have, to be quite honest, across the board in all parties, is that we want to work in partnership. We don't want this role of saying you're now going to be subservient to us and that implication. So perhaps, perhaps we need a bit of a steer from Wales Audit, possibly, or from another organisation to say how this is all going to fit together in terms of scrutiny.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Do we have any other questions or comments? Tom, I think you wanted to come in there, and Anthony as well.
I was just going to ask whether Anthony might be able to address Councillor Johnson's query regarding the accounts. I forgot to prompt when I was going through Appendix A. My apologies, Anthony.
It's fine, Tom, and that's why I'll just lower my hand, Councillor. I'll just pick up. Just go back to Councillor Johnston's query. If I take us back to, I think the date was 8th of October 2020, where we provided an opinion on the 2019-20 financial statements. We were able to give an opinion on the accounts, but we couldn't certify closure because, if the committee recalls, we had 2 outstanding objections at that point in time, which we needed to review. We were able to give an opinion because we'd done enough work on the objections. We knew they weren't material objections. Hence, we gave the opinion, but no certification of closure. We've now completed our work on the two objections, and we've actually issued we've reissued the opinion, which was exactly the same opinion as we provided on the 8th of October. The difference being this time we've been able to certify closure of the 2019-20 financial statements. And if my memory serves me right, we certified the accounts with closure on, I think at the beginning of the month, probably 6th of May, and I then wrote to Caris to confirm that that had actually taken place and was completed. So that process has been undertaken, and the accounts are now certified and closed.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you much for that update, Anthony. And are we allowed to ask whether the concerns raised, although not material, were validated and accepted, or were they?
In respect of the first objection, Councillor, the matter related to Section 106 monies due to and received by the council from a contractor regarding a development in the county. From memory, the contention was that the way in which the council spent the money was not lawful, and the spending of the 106 agreement was contravening the Active Travel Wales Act. We were quite clear in terms of our conclusion. We did the review, we concluded our work, and I think the Auditor General reported his decision and statement of reasons on this matter. I think it was probably back in January, and we concluded that there was no grounds to conclude that the expenditure incurred was unlawful, and we had no evidence of any non-compliance with the provisions of the 106 agreement or indeed the Active Travel Wales Act. So that one was, we put that one to bed. In respect of the second objection, the matter related to an access scheme which resulted in part of a private drive being tarmacked. We have concluded this work. Internal audit supported us in this work as well, which was very helpful. There were a number of issues arising that we have since reported to the council. We will follow up those recommendations. Hopefully they'll go on the tracker as well. So there were a couple of recommendations on the back of that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any other questions or comments? Caris.
I don't know whether I could just add to that, Chair, that we've, as Anthony has said, we've received a letter notifying us that the accounts are now certified as closed, and he did raise issues with me, and I can confirm actually that those are being addressed in a report that's due to go to Cabinet at the beginning of June, as some of those contracts are due for renewal. So we're going to take on board the issues that have been raised through this process, and they'll be reflected in that tendering process. So that's going to Cabinet at the beginning of June.
Okay, thank you for that, Caris. Before we conclude this item, I just have one sort of, it's more a point really rather than a question. Feel free to answer if you wish, but I'm not sure you'll be in a position to. It's following on from what Councillor Wilson was saying about the scrutiny process. And the idea really came to mind when he talked about both the Assembly or the Senedd and Westminster as well, is the fact that when you look at either the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, or indeed Westminster, part of the scrutiny function is provided by the fact that there are independent clerks available who assist backbench members and indeed opposition members with both process and indeed advising in an impartial manner about how the system works. Now, from a practical point of view, I'm not quite sure how you would get around this, but obviously the situation in local government is rather different in the fact that council officers are in effect part of the council machinery rather than being independent. And I'm not making any statements as to the propriety or otherwise of council officers here, and I want members to be quite clear that that's not what I'm doing. It was just really a sort of point to ask whether anything could be done to provide members who aren't part of the executive with the resource, perhaps through a research service or similar, to enable them to provide that scrutiny, which, as things stand, you're sort of going to a council officer for advice who in many cases is doing their job correctly, but they are in effect serving the administration. So it was just a question really as to whether any resource could be made available to enable opposition or backbench members to independent resource to enable to provide that scrutiny function. And I think Councillor Wilson would like to come in on that point as well.
Can I come in on this, Chair? You made a very good point, actually. And certainly when I first started being an elected member, certainly we did have that position. We did have a scrutiny officers that only spent time looking at scrutiny. But because of the cuts to local government finance over a number of years, that has kind of disappeared. So we almost got a blending now of the Cabinet Office with scrutiny into democratic. It's much more blended. It never used to be like that. But of course, over the years, councils, and us included, had to make cuts. And I think that's come out of that process. But I do agree that's something that should be looked at. But I think that should be something that Welsh Audit Office should be looking at personally, because I think it's a broader picture, it's a bigger picture than just us as a council. I think that's something that going forward, I think especially with the new committees, there is an opportunity to revisit possibly the splitting up of the democratic function. I mean, obviously you've got member supports every member. I agree. Every member has support, has issues with IT, don't we? We have issues with our various other housekeeping issues. But you're right, we could be looking at separation, but it will cost money, you know. And again, in the world of different priorities, I suppose we're fairly low down the priority in terms of other things we need to spend money on.
That's really helpful to have that insight, actually, Councillor Wilson. I must confess I was unaware of that, and I think that it could be something that's referred forward to the Welsh Audit Office to take a look at, because, as I've said, I want to make it quite clear I wasn't questioning the role of any officers. It was just a broader point with regard to the fact that when you have a sort of legislature, executive, separation of powers type system, that doesn't really exist in local government, or indeed, at least the way things are structured at the moment. But Councillor McCaffrey, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, all I only wanted to say, just a quick point really, is that I understand completely what you and Councillor Wilson are saying. However, I just have to say that in my own personal experience of being a scrutiny chair, I found the Democratic team really useful and very knowledgeable about what we can and can't do. And the support was absolutely there, and it was impartial support that I got, and it wasn't anything to do with the administration at the time either way. So I just wanted to make that point and say the officers are there when you do need them to be there.
Thank you for that, Councillor McCaffrey. Do we have any other questions or comments? Mr. Lewis.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't have my hand up.
Sorry, I thought you were gesturing, but that's my error. If we move on to the recommendations, then first of all, to note the contents of the annual audit summary and refer the report to the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, where a few of us at least will be considering it again, and to review the progress made. I think we've done or are doing both of those, so assuming everyone's in agreement, we will move on to the next item, which is the Audit Wales 2021 audit plan.
Shall I quickly start this one, Chair, and then probably pass it over to my colleagues in Audit Wales if they've got anything particular that they want to see. The last report you considered was reporting what Audit Wales did in the last financial year. What this plan is putting forward to you is what they propose to do now during the current year. You'll see, as was reported previously, that they do a range of work, whether that's on our financial statements, issues to do with value for money, continuous improvement, and looking at the Sustainable Development Principle. And you'll see attached in Appendix 1 the planned work for the current year. I suppose just to note that COVID has obviously had an impact on everything, and it will impact on the way in which they undertake their audits, but also they will do more work this year, in particular on the money that we've received during the financial year to support the COVID, and you'll know from reports that we've made available throughout the year, we've had significant funding in. So obviously Audit Wales will look at that during the course of the year. And the other change from a financial point of view is last year was the full financial year where the Big Fresh catering company was operating. So for the first time, we will have to do group accounts now in relation to the 2020-21 financial year. So that will be some new work that, new work for Audit Wales in the Vale and new work for us in putting those group accounts together. And there is detail then in the report in relation to the performance audit and other works that Audit Wales plan to do during the current financial year. So I don't know whether either Anthony or Steve would want to add anything to that.
I think you covered it very well, Caris. I'm sure the committee will be quite used to seeing our annual plan come through. It's in a very similar format to the way we've issued it in previous years. Just to reiterate what you said around COVID, certainly the performance element of the plan, there's not as much information in there as there would typically be in an audit plan, and that's intentional because we want to keep as much flexibility in terms of the work to enable us to respond to sort of your issues around COVID and, of course, pressures on staff. So that's going to be more of an iterative, incremental process as we build up the programme. And, of course, we'll before we embark on any piece of work, we'll obviously have the discussion with the MD, yourself, Tom, etc., in terms of how we take that forward. So not a great deal to add. As you can imagine, the risks in terms of financial audit work again will be geared around COVID, as you would expect. But apart from that, I think you've covered everything very well, Caris. But we're more than happy to take any particular questions on the report.
Okay, thank you for that. I see Councillor Wilson, first of all.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of points, observations primarily, especially on I'm trying to page 9 of 18, the McLeod judgment, the implications on pensions. As you probably know, a few years ago, in local government and in other public sector schemes, especially the teacher pension agency scheme, certainly there has been a bit of a reversal going on in terms of due to the equalities legislation, because it found out that the what we call the average career break scheme, or the average average salary scheme, there seemed to be more discriminatory than the final salary scheme in terms of older people, and certainly it does have implications on lots of staff, and certainly could have cost implications in terms of the council and in audit. So obviously that judgment is still going through, and I know that there are things happening. So I just wondered perhaps maybe we could get an update on that in the near future, just to look at the implications in terms of the local authority and in general. And the other thing is obviously is the timeline as well. Timeline again is severely tight, and it's very difficult. It's putting pressure on our superb audit service and also our accounting service as well. And I think it is very, very difficult and challenging, given the fact that the vast majority of people are still working remotely to use this. And perhaps is there any degree of flexibility from Audit Wales in terms of helping out our officers who have got, many other commitments other than this?
Do you want me to answer some, and then Anthony, if you could assist.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, in relation to McLeod, yes, we could certainly bring a report on some of those implications. I know you've had some briefings on it as part of the closure of accounts, but we could certainly bring a brief report to you about the implications that it possibly has on our accounts. That's fine. In relation to the timeline, I think actually it is relaxed slightly for this year just gone, again because of COVID. We are working very closely actually with Anthony and Steve and their team on the deadlines that we've got. I mean, I suppose one positive is we've been working remotely now for the whole of the last financial year. So whereas last year we kind of closed the accounts having been in the office for the vast majority of the year and then had to close everything remotely, we have been working remotely throughout the last financial year, and our systems have improved as a result. But we, as I say, we do continue to liaise closely with our colleagues in Audit Wales to make sure that we try and address things if there are issues as soon as we can, and to get support and guidance from them of anything that is new or we want to deal with differently as a result of COVID. And actually that's been very positive, I think, and has been ongoing now for a good few months as we plan how we're going to close the accounts. At the moment, from our point of view, we are online now to close them by the date that we've agreed with Audit Wales. So we are, I think, the straight answer to you, Councillor Wilson, is we are working hard to hit the deadlines both across the council and across Audit Wales. I don't know whether Anthony wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Caris. I think it's still going to be difficult. Hopefully, it'll be a bit easier this year because we've all a little bit more experienced and we've been down that road. But I think Councillor Wilson's spot on. It's still not easy, particularly with so much pressure on yourselves and indeed ourselves. I think put this into context, the plan was originally that we would be doing the accounts and signing off at the end of July. We're obviously nowhere near that position because of COVID. The Welsh Government have issued some guidelines saying, well, look, taking everything into the round, we would want and expect local authority accounts to be completed and certified by the end of November. So what we've got is some middle ground that we've come to with the council. If we hit the buffers or there was a problem for Caris in terms of her team, we'd be around the table, we'd be discussing it, we'd be working out solutions. And if we had to come back at a slightly later date, we'd work that through if it was the right thing to do. Regarding McLeod, this has been the bane of my life for the last 3 years because, and it's a very, very good point you raised, Councillor. This is something that a remedy is being sought precisely for that age discrimination and that you mentioned. And the reason we put it in the plan is because we don't know when we'll receive that remedy, because if we get the remedy through from the government before we sign the accounts off, that then starts a process in motion, because it may result in the actuaries having to do some recalculations for the accounts themselves. So as you can imagine, they're very busy people at that point, but we may need updated figures for the accounts. But again, that's something that we've got in view, and that's something that we'll be liaising with the council on as we progress from now through till the end of September.
Thank you for that, Anthony. I think Councillor Wilson would like to come back on that.
Yeah, can I say thank you very much for that. I'm really delighted that you are going to meet the deadlines, but don't speak too soon, Caris. You know what can happen. So, so fingers crossed. But the second issue, though, about the McLeod judgment, yes, I think it's very important that obviously I think it might be good if we could have a briefing note to members, because I don't think all the members are really aware of the implications of this. And it does have serious implications, because it could be quite a big impact, a big financial hit for councils and other public bodies as well, especially if people do want to have the best for themselves, and normally that does occur in reality, because often with pensions it's not just so much about yourself, it's also about your family as well. So I think perhaps we do need to be prepared for it, and we do need to be looking at that. And I mean, obviously, it'd be quite interesting to see how government's going to finance this, because it has serious implications. Certainly what I've heard from where I work in the college, in Cardiff Vale College, and certainly, you know, some rumours seem to say you've got to fund it from your own resources. Well, that's going to be very challenging for a lot of public bodies to say you've got to fund it from your own resources. What we're really looking for is the UK government to step up with the cash. Now, obviously, they can find money for other things. Hope they can find money for this, but it does have implications. So I will look forward to a briefing note to members, not just to audit committee members on this.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, in that case, if we review and note the contents of the report, which I think we've done, and if we move on then to item 8, which is the effectiveness of the audit. So,
just before you go on to the next item, I kind of made a recommendation, Chair, and I just wondered perhaps if anyone would second that recommendation in terms of getting a briefing note to all members about the implications of the McLeod judgment.
I'm happy to second that. I'm assuming we can agree that unanimously as well. Don't see any dissent, so I think that's agreed, and we have reviewed and noted the contents. So if we move on to item 8 then, which is the effectiveness of the audit committee self-assessment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll take this report. Yes, on page 59 of the agenda pack, the purpose of the report is to update members of the committee following feedback on the findings of the self-assessment of good practice from the SIPFA Audit Committee Practical Guidance 2018, which was originally reported on 1st of March 2021, the last audit committee. The executive summary, if I can go through a couple of the points there. The effectiveness of the audit committee has been reviewed in line with the SIPFA self-assessment good practice checklist. The overall effectiveness was found to be good, with the few areas having recommendations for improvement which require consideration. And with the agreement of members, I'll take members through the recommendations to get a steer of the committee's views on those recommendations. The third point there, skills and knowledge self-assessment questionnaire has been completed by, that should say, all members, and the results will assist in developing a training package. There was one question that came in slightly late, so we weren't able to get those amendments to the report done in time for the report being circulated, but this is a draft report anyway, so we'll make sure that we capture that 8th question there in the final report. Okay, if I just take members through the rest of the report, just sets up the background there, which is broadly what I've already covered, referring to the SIPFA good practice checklist. Key issues for consideration in section 2 of the Kevin report. The checklist and its findings were presented to the last audit committee. A draft report is attached at Appendix A, which provides a summary of the findings, whilst Appendix B is the updated checklist. And the draft audit report includes a management implementation plan which lists the recommendations being made as a result of this work, and perhaps, as I referred to earlier, we can go through that together. The questionnaire has been completed now by all members following it as it was circulated electronically, and that's reflected in the report, bar the one late return that came through. Okay, if I just scroll down through the agenda pack, and as I said earlier, Appendix A is the internal audit report covering this this piece of work. And if I scroll down to section 621, which is page 67 of your pack, there's a table there that analyzes the returns that we had. So this refers to 7 questionnaires being returned. As I said, in reality they were 8. So the figures in the middle column there, in terms of the level of knowledge and experience against some of the questions, they all need to go up by 1. So then that'll give us the accurate answer. But when we circulate the final report, that those figures will be updated. And the only other point was next page down. top of page 7 or page 68 of the pack should refer to 8 responses, as I said earlier, and then 622. There was some additional responses there in terms of program and project management. There was an additional affirmative response for that point, and also IT systems and IT governance. That one response there from a member. Okay, if I just scroll down through, obviously members will have seen the report, and if I just take you to the management implementation plan, which is the recommendations, the first 2 recommendations, the first one is in relation to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. The implications of that need to be reflected in the terms of reference. That's been done. That was done via Managing Director's emergency powers and implemented in April 2021. And obviously, we're coming on to that at the next item on the agenda. And the second recommendation there was that it was considered whether the terms of reference needed to be consolidated, because in the Constitution, the role of Audit Committee and so on was in 2 places, and it wasn't easily found. So it made sense to consolidate that information into one place, which again has been done. The next few recommendations, they're all merits attention, so they're best practice. They're not anything fundamental, but it was worth flagging up because they came out of the checklist for members' consideration. So if everybody's in agreement, if I just go through the recommendations 3 to 7, and just get a steer from you all as to whether you agree with that as a committee, and then depending on that, then there may be some discussion needed with certain officers, such as the monitoring officer, on taking forward those recommendations. So recommendation 3 was the Governance and Audit Committee considers producing an annual report that is presented to full council on what it's looked at and how effective it's been and so on. I know that is generally done in relation to scrutiny committees, and it's identified as good practice, as I say, in the CIPFA checklist, but it isn't generally done for most audit committees, but we're just flagging that up as something for consideration. So perhaps if I pause there, Chair, not sure if members have got any thoughts on that particular point.
Councillor Johnson, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Mark. I mean, I was actually going to wonder whether it was worth going through all of the points and then coming back, because I think that okay. I was going to say is that broadly is that I think all of these are fair and acceptable points and things that can be done and should be looked at as we move between now and the the change in the sort of in the committee with the legislation anyway. So I mean the best practice is best practice, and why wouldn't you do best practice? I'll stop there.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, what I was saying, I echo what Councillor Johnson is saying, but I also like to go a bit further in saying that, bearing in mind we've got an opportunity now, since it's the last year of this administration at the moment, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen in 2022. We obviously need to consider perhaps how we deliver training in the future. Now, I think perhaps sometimes we've done training where someone goes through a PowerPoint, and then we kind of listen and learn a bit. And I just think sometimes we need to do a bit more training, perhaps, so that members feel more confident about getting to grips with various things. And I think perhaps a bit more interactive training wouldn't be amiss, to be quite honest. We're not testing people really, but what we're trying to find out is people's knowledge and they feel do they feel comfortable? I mean, I know, Mark, Mark Thomas here, you have said many times, that our audit committee speaks quite a lot, but when you go to other audit committees, often lots of things go through on the nod. Now, really, my question mark I say about that is, are members either really interested or do they really understand what's in front of them? And, it's a bit of a concern here when you do have committees where perhaps things go through the nod because some members are too frightened to raise something because it might reveal they don't know that much. And I think perhaps, I think going forward, some degree of training where people have got to go through various questions to see that they do actually understand what's in front of them and maybe picking up things would be a good exercise. After all, we are the audit committee. We should be good at picking up things. And obviously there's a synergy between audit and scrutiny. It's a strong synergy. And I do think that's something that we could do something about it. Also, I think it's a good thing that perhaps we involve not just the present councillors, but prospective candidates looking at this as well. So that candidates, when they want to stand for the council, perhaps have a better understanding of audit and scrutiny and other functions of the council before they become members. I know Councillor Johnson looked at me rather quizzically, but I'm always interested what Councillor Ian Johnson thinks. But I do feel that people need to have perhaps a better understanding of what they get themselves into before they actually join the council.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll go to Mr. Lewis, and then, assuming there are no further points or questions, I'll then leave it to Mark to go through the rest of the recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I echo the points that Councillor Johnson and Councillor Wilson have made, really. I'm quite concerned, you know, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but I've offered my resignation as of the elections next year, so I don't intend to stand again as a lay member when this term of council finishes. So you will be looking at least one new lay member, possibly 2 or 3, I don't know. But the fact is that after 10 years of doing this job, I still don't feel confident in many areas. And when you talk about the internal workings of how the council works and the interaction with scrutiny committees, etc., it's still not clear to me how all that all works. And I'm even more disappointed to see, I'm sorry to say this, Mark, but under 6.2.2 of this report, which is page 7 of 11 on my paperwork here, there are only 2 people and on the entire audit committee who say that they understand accountancy, that they understand internal audit, and that they understand risk audit, risk management, and one of them is me. So, you know, you're effectively going to end up at the end of this year with only one person declaring a familiarity with the subject that is most pertinent to the committee. So that's my concern. So when it comes to saying, as Mark said just now, that more familiarity needs to be taken with regard to accounts and audits and the workings, etc., I wholeheartedly support that. It's very difficult for somebody who isn't a councillor, who's never been a councillor before, to come in as a lay member and pick all this up. It's almost impossible. And I'm a chartered accountant. I used to be a managing director. I understand how committees work. But the fact is, whoever replaces me is going to have a very difficult job. And it's not because I'm marvellous, but it's because you're moving the goalposts. And the next guy is going to have to be the chairman as well. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I'm sorry, that's my view. So more training, yes, more training. Mark, great. Councillor Johnson, great. Take note of what these people are saying. I think is vital. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks to you know, Mark and Paul for those comments. I don't want to prolong this, but I mean it's interesting having this item before the item about the the new legislation and the next one, because the whole point is that the context for all of this is changing. So the lay member next time, the committee chair will be a lay member. But a third of the committee, at least, if I remember correctly, will be lay members. So the context of this committee is going to be quite different. We are, the majority of us here, or 7 of the 8 of us, are here as political appointments because we are elected councillors, and this is the sort of the proportionate role that we are given. The different parties get different posts, and we are not necessarily therefore here because of our skills in any of these areas, and therefore. The hope is, I found that question that Paul was referring to there about do you have additional knowledge on this? And I don't think I really answered that question personally, because I thought, do I have additional knowledge? Well, I'm not a chartered accountant, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a project manager. So actually, I don't bring any of those skills to the committee, because those are additional skills that actually we want our lay members to be bringing, and that's probably the purpose of the legislation. And I work with most of us, I think, have been school governors at some point, and we have a similar matrix and we use that to go, okay, these are the appointments that we've already got. Where are we looking for additional knowledge that will bring added value? And that's that question of, do you have knowledge of in this area or that area, is what will be part of the hopefully the search committee that Councillor Wilson was referring to last time. So it's a bit of a a chicken and egg situation here, because the new situation that we will have after the next election, and whoever of us is elected to be on the council and then selected by our parties to be on this committee, will be in a very different situation to where we are right now, where we just have yourself, Paul, because there'll be a lot more lay members, and hopefully a bit more the needs of the lay members will therefore be taken into consideration from the get-go, whereas perhaps they're not always considered in the way that they are now. So I didn't want to go off on one, because obviously Mark wants to talk through the recommendations. I support all the recommendations and suggestions there, by the way, Mark. But if you want to go into more depth, then please feel free to. Thanks.
I mean, yeah, if I could just add on that point as well, I think if I recall correctly, ticked no to every question there because I took it to mean professional expertise. And I think it's somewhat ironic in the name. I think that you're more likely to have a lay member who has specific knowledge, whereas a councillor or an elected member is more likely to be looking at this like a layman would. But and I think that's why getting more lay members on, admittedly we've got a challenge in attracting them to the role, I think will put the committee in a stronger position. But I won't say any more. I'll hand back to Mark.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Paul would like to ask another question.
You're on mute, Paul.
I think you're on mute again.
There we are. Better now?
Yeah.
I'm afraid my iPad's playing up. I got a touchy screen here. Is that you must remember that lay members are not non-executive directors. They don't bring specific skills to the table, albeit that when I was appointed, I was quizzed on my financial skills and my financial background, etc., etc., and I was probably appointed more for that than anything else. But it doesn't mean to say that anybody who may be interested in becoming a lay member of an audit committee in the future will necessarily have been a chartered accountant, or have been a managing director, or have been anything else, other than maybe wants to earn a few quid because he thinks sitting on a committee in the council might be good fun. So I think it's going to be very difficult for you all, and I wish you all the best. I'm sorry that I'm leaving you, but I'm 73 now. I just can't go on another 5 years. I'm sorry. But I just would like to make the point that we are not appointed as non-executive directors, effectively. We are just lay members who are trying to bring. My idea was I was trying to bring the layman's point of view from the man in the street. I didn't expect to have to add any particular financial expertise to the committee, but obviously in future that person will need to do so. Okay, that's all.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think you made very good points, Paul, because I do feel that we do need a lay member's perspective on a lot of issues on the council. I know lifelong learning also has lay members on there. Housing Scrutiny Committee has lay members as well. So, it's not alien to have lay members in terms of being on council committees. But nevertheless, I think going forward, we do need to be thinking about the membership of any lay members, because I just don't think it's as simple to have people with professional qualifications, because I think that's a plethora of different things anyway. And I think where we're going in terms of local government, and yes, the Big Fresh company is an interesting example because it's kind of will be supposed delivered in a more, I suppose, in a private sector kind of company style fashion of doing things. So we do need that insight of people perhaps who've worked in the private sector and have managed financial organisations from a financial perspective. Yes, we do. But equally, though, we also need to have members who have been aware and have looked at, who've been in audit committees or public bodies. And I think that is very relevant as well. But obviously, we also got to think about other things that perhaps we haven't yet developed enough yet. And that's the future generations legislation, the 5 ways of working. I mean, these are sort of areas where perhaps audit is going, and the qualitative dimensions of things, decarbonisation of society. These are sort of things that, I would have imagined future audit committees are going to be looking at more strongly than they've been doing so previously.
On that, I'll hand back to Mark.
Okay, thank you, Jay, and thank you everyone for their comments. Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Johnson's point in terms of the recommendations, they're all set there for you really, recommendations 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Perhaps rather than me going through each one, they seem pretty sort of self-explanatory. Maybe it would be easier picking up the points that have been said. Is if there is anybody perhaps doesn't agree with them, that would probably be quicker way of dealing with those items. Chair, can I ask that? You're on mute, Chair.
Apologies, I think that's very sensible. So I'll open up to the floor once again then, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, just quickly, really, just on points 4 and 5. 3, obviously great, as long as it can be developed in a short, punchy style that's easily understandable by the rest of the council. Point 4 and 5, I think are, I think if there's a way of just fleshing out who we think of as our stakeholders from whom we want to seek feedback, and similarly in terms of evaluating, added value, is there a best practice that's already in place for understanding what that could be? I mean, it's one of the issues, obviously, that a regulatory committee can get caught up very much in its own processes and in making sure we tick every single box, adding value and making this all worthwhile beyond just making sure that everything is okay is obviously a big thing. But what does that actually mean in this context? As I say, the 6 and 7 about training programs, I mean, great. Obviously, there are some people on this committee who feel more confident than others. But we also don't know who's going to be on this committee after next May. So I think there's the issue about lay members, or the helpful thing for lay members will be they will help to balance out the expertise of the committee vis-a-vis those who are political appointments. We're quite fortunate in having at least 2 of the group leaders, sort of on this committee. I think it helps us with an overview of how the council works, for our roles in that as well. But ultimately, there's a decision made as to who sits on this committee based around proportionality on the council, and we just need to be the best that we can.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, I will take that we all agree the outstanding recommendations. So I'll check once more for dissent, and if not, we will respond by accepting them. I think that's agreed. If we move on to the next item then, which is the Local Government and Elections Wales Act.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously, as we've just discussed around the implications of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and we'll have no doubt have a bit of a discussion again on this point. Myself and Tom did a presentation, I think it was the last committee, just sort of giving an overview of the implications of the Act, and in particular the implications for the Governance and Audit Committee. So this is just confirming some of the points that were made then, and also to flag up the updated terms of reference in the Constitution, as I referenced in the earlier report as well. But essentially, on the executive summary front sheet there, the report provides the committee with an overview for information of the provisions within the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and in particular the provisions within the Act relating to the arrangements for the Governance and Audit Committee at paragraph 2.5 of this report. The report also provides the committee with an update on some additional changes to the committee terms of reference made under the Managing Director's emergency powers, which comply with the current timescales of the Act and bring together into one place some aspects of the committee's remit that were found elsewhere in the Council's constitution. Appendix 1 to the report contains the full updated terms of reference as agreed at the Council's annual meeting on the 10th of May, just gone, and the provisions of the Act that come into force by May 2022 will be subject to a further report to the committee. Section 1 then of the report just sets up the background and so on, and the processes that were gone through. But essentially 1.5, paragraph 1.5, the Act is substantial and covers a range of topics from governance and performance, electoral reform, public participation through to regional working. In summary, the Act introduces reform of the performance and governance regime, reform in electoral arrangements for local government, introduction of general power of competence, reform in public participation in local government and collaborative working. Cabinet has responded previously to the various policy documents referenced in paragraph 1.4, and those are not repeated here. Both the Council's Cabinet and Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee have considered and been apprised of the report and the action in December 2020 and January 2021 respectively, and as I've just referenced, the committee had a presentation from myself on Tom on the item as well, the last committee. In terms of the key issues for consideration in section 2 of the report, 2.2 there refers to report attendance and related matters will be commenced from May 2021 when the current emergency coronavirus meetings regulations end. Performance and governance arrangements will be commenced from April 2021 with a final performance report from the 2009 measure published by the end of October. Most of the electoral reforms will be introduced in time for implementation at the 2022 local elections, and the power of general competence, public participation duties, broadcasting of meetings and new councillor duties again will apply from 2022 local elections. But just to focus on the main issues, I suppose, as this committee is concerned, in relation to the new Governance and Audit Committee, as it's called, the Act introduces previously consulted upon reforms to audit committees. Section 115 of the Act came into force on April just gone, and this basically covers matters relating to the committee title, as you're already aware, performance assessment and complaints, and set out below. So the bullet points there are the new duties. Title, as I've mentioned, to consider the Council's draft annual performance self-assessment report, and if deemed necessary to make recommendations for changes to the Council, to receive the Council's finalised annual self-assessment report in respect of a financial year as soon as it's reasonably practical after the end of the financial year, at least once during the period between 2 consecutive elections of councillors to the council, consider the independent panel performance assessment report into which the council is meeting its performance requirements, but that'll be once during a 5-year cycle, so that obviously won't be happening annually. To receive and review the council's draft response to the report of any independent panel, and if deemed necessary, may make recommendations for changes to the statement made in the draft response to the council. Again, that'll happen once. To review and assess the council's ability to deal with complaints effectively. Complaints comes to this committee, has historically come to this committee anyway, but it's now a particular duty because it doesn't happen at all audit committees historically, and also then to make reports and recommendations in relation to the council's ability to deal with complaints effectively. So that'll be all wrapped up in a report that will come to this committee in due course. The other changes, which obviously we've discussed in terms of membership and so on, will be coming into effect in May 2022. As we know, just to confirm, 1/3 of the committee's membership must be made up from lay persons appointed by the council. The committee will be chaired by a lay member elected by the committee, as already discussed again, and the vice chair elected by the committee may be a Vale Glamorgan councillor or a lay member, but must not be a member of the authority's cabinet (brackets executive) or an assistant to his executive, using the terminology in the legislation. As I've already referred, paragraph 2.5, under the Managing Director's emergency powers, certain things have already been put in place and also then confirmed at the AGM held recently. I'm not going to go through all the points because in effect they largely repeat the points have already been made in terms of the changes to the terms of reference. But moving down through the report, paragraph 2.6 refers to Appendix 1, which is the complete updated terms of reference of the new committee, which includes the additions approved by the Managing Director as agreed at the AGM as well. So really it was just an opportunity to bring members up to speed in terms of where we are. Specifically to answer the point that was raised right at the start of the meeting in relation to the search committee, I think I mentioned last time when this was mentioned, there's been discussion nationally as to whether there needs to be or there should be or the merits of undertaking some sort of national exercise in terms of recruiting members, because obviously there's going to be a number of people need to be recruited across the whole of Wales. There's been a draft job description produced, or two job descriptions, one for a lay member and one for the chair, and that's been coordinated by the WLGA with input from authorities, from officers in authorities, and currently we discussing the merits of and being involved in some sort of coordinated process nationally, maybe a national advert of some description possibly, but very much with local appointments then of members. There's a meeting taking place in June to see what the level of interest is from different authorities in relation to being involved in that sort of process, and then I can feed back then in terms of the possibility of being involved in such a process. There are some merits in doing it to avoid duplication, and saving some money, but I think it's very much it would be a starting point, but it has to be locally determined then in terms of appointments to this committee going forward, and what is needed in a local circumstance. We talked earlier on about having the right mix of people and so on, and the right sort of skills and that sort of thing. It is about having the right mix of people. So that's the current situation. So no decisions have been made, but that's part of what's been considered nationally. As I said, there's a meeting in June to see if there's any interest or benefit in taking that forward. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. I think Councillor Wilson has been waiting patiently for a while, so I'll go straight to him.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I'm glad you picked up a point about the search committee, because I was going to bring it up again. I do feel, though, we do need to establish that, because I just don't think, something I will discuss with cabinet members, because I do feel that even every council should have a search committee anyway. Certainly, I've been in public bodies in the past where we've had search committees. It's not an unusual process to have, and I think certainly we could look at it not just in terms of audit, but other areas as well at the council where we need to recruit expertise from outsiders. I agree with you about your point. If we have something national, we can then kind of like filter it through, and that could be a filtering process. One of the things that you may want to, I know Councillor Johnson made a kind of joking remark when you said I could go on tour and visit all the other audit committees. No, I don't think that is right and proper, to be quite honest, Councillor Johnson. And I don't think that's right and proper for any person to do that, to be honest. I mean, we do have some issues when people are governors of two schools, because what they do is comparing the two schools, and that's dangerous for various reasons, because every school is quite different, has different cohorts and everything. So you always got to be careful if you compare two councils' performances, because a lot of it lies in the context, and that's vital. Context is it's paramount here. So yes, I agree. I think that's something that should be done perhaps centrally, but I don't want a bureaucratic process to take over, because in that sense you may be putting off the people you may want to have, because often you'll find that the people that you really want are probably quite busy people, and to be honest, if you have an over bureaucratic process, and I've seen that from Welsh Government on public appointments committees, they tend to take ages and they have such a big form, they put a lot of people off from even applying, and because they haven't got the time. So that's something that I would like you to feed back, possible, Mark, to make sure we have a very people got expressions of interest by all means, but no more than a page of paper, just outline their skills and experiences and whatever. And then perhaps they can have an interview. Make it simple. Don't make it complicated. You know, not unless you have hundreds of people applying. That might be a different matter, but I doubt it somehow.
No, I doubt it too.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Jay. Quick question from Mark. We talked about the legislation says that a third of the governance audit committee should be lay members. Does it say anything, or is there any guidance about the actual number of people on the committee to make up that third or 2/3? The reason I say that in this context is, you know, following the discussion we just had, is that one of, I think, the benefits for the council of this committee is the proportionality of political membership, that we have representation from all 5 political groups. So it's one of these questions about whether whether there's an intention to decide on the number on the committee in advance of the elections, or to consider it in light of the results of the elections. Because what you could have is a situation where the cut-off point becomes one which 2 or even 3 groups on the council don't have a place on this important committee, and it's going to be a more important committee, sort of as we go forward, and then that sort of you lose those different perspectives on on how the council operates if smaller parties are closed out at any point. Just flagging that up.
Yeah, in terms of numbers on committees, I haven't seen anything anywhere that sort of suggests any particular numbers. My experience currently is that we've got quite different numbers in different authorities. I think Bridgender's probably got double the number of members on its audit committee compared to the Vale, for example, and the other 2 authorities I go to is probably somewhere in the middle. But there's nothing that I've seen in any guidance or anywhere in the legislation that sort of prescribes or suggests the numbers on a committee. I think I'm right in saying in Cardiff, for example, the audit committee there is all external lay people. There aren't any councillors on that one at all. So you've got quite different sort of setups in different places. But your point around any consideration around numbers on future audit committee is it is a good point, because obviously if you're going to recruit, if we're looking for looking for lay members, we need to know how many people then we need to recruit based on the number of members that will be on the committee. So that'll be something that we will need to flag up. But as I say, there is no particular guide or reference point to that. It's just there are different examples of what's done currently.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Mr. Lewis. You're on mute, Paul.
Okay. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Mark referred to section 2.4 of this report, and on page 4, where it says that 1/3 of the committee's membership must be made up of lay members or persons appointed by the council, and the Governance and Audit Committee shall be chaired by the lay member. But then when I look at the first couple of comments on page 1 of Appendix 1, we find that terminology has been changed to up to 1/3 of the members may be from outside the council, and at least one must be a lay member. And then it says the chairman and vice chairman may be a Vale of Morgan councillor or a lay member.
Yeah.
So they don't add up they contradictory.
No. No. You're quite right. Well done on spotting that. That is deliberate, because the provisions around the increase in lay members and the chairmanship only comes into effect in May 2022. So this still reflects the current position. So it's been updated for the provisions that come in, have come in. But in terms of the membership and the chairing, it's still what the old rules still apply up until. So then this part of the terms of reference will then need to be updated.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll take that as a no then. If we note the report and the appendix and move on to item 10, the Regional Internal Audit Service Charter.
Thank you. I'll take that one. Item 10 is the Regional Internal Audit Service Charter for 2021-22. This charter defines the purpose, authority and responsibilities of the Regional Internal Audit Service across all 4 authorities. As you know, the head of Internal Audit is responsible for reviewing the charter and presenting it to the Governance and Audit Committee for review annually. Therefore, at Appendix A is the charter for 2021-22. As members of this committee may recall, this charter was fully reviewed and updated in 2021 and agreed by all 4 authorities. Following a recent review, the only change made to the Charter Appendix A is in relation to the change of title of the committee as a result of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. Therefore, as per the committee's terms of reference, members of the committee are asked to consider and approve the Charter for 2021-22 as set out in Appendix A. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? I take that as a no. If we, in that case, consider and approve the charter, I don't see any dissent, I don't think, so I'll take that as approved. Thank you for that, Joan. On to the next item, the progress against the internal audit risk-based plan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll take that one as well. Okay, this report sets out the progress against the plan as members are used to seeing. Please note that this is a draft position as some work was still in the process of being completed when the report was compiled. Therefore, at Appendix A, it details as usual the status of each planned review, the audit opinion and the number of high or medium recommendations made to improve the control environment. Appendix A illustrates that, as at the time of writing the report, 37 items of work had been completed, of which 23 audits had resulted in an opinion being provided. A total of 4 audits are ongoing and a further 6 have been issued as draft, but all these will be included in the final annual opinion report. Of the 23 completed audits, 5 have been given an audit opinion of substantial, 15 a reasonable opinion, and 3 have been given a limited opinion, that is, only limited assurance can be placed on the internal controls. Details of 2 of the 3 limited assurance reports are included within the report, whilst the 3rd was reported to committee at the last time. The 2 reported this time are All Saints Primary School follow-up. This audit was previously concluded in March 2020 and it gave a limited assurance opinion and 16 recommendations were made at the time to improve the internal controls at the school. The follow-up review revisited these original recommendations. However, it's recognised that due to the pandemic, the schools were under extreme pressure and the audit work undertaken, however, did show that little progress had been made. The main areas of concern were regarding the composition and membership of the school governing body and therefore the governance arrangements at the school. However, a meeting was held with the Chair of Governors and the head teacher and all the recommendations have now been discussed and agreed and an action plan has been put into place. Therefore, this progress will be reviewed before the summer break and reported back. The other area that was of limited assurance was youth services. The audit work undertaken here identified some key issues in respect of internal processes and procedures that were not always compliant with financial procedure rules, such as gaps in inventory and asset monitoring and excessively high expenses being claimed to reimburse staff for purchases incurred for young people. Again, all recommendations were discussed and agreed with management and progress will be examined in a future follow-up review. Appendix A also illustrates that 62 medium recommendations have been made to make improvements to the control environment, and these are monitored by internal audit to ensure implementation. Finally, I'd just like to say that although some service areas have been under intense pressure and some audits have been deferred or will be rearranged to accommodate the service requests. It is felt that sufficient coverage has been delivered to allow a year-end audit opinion to be provided in the Head of Internal Audit's annual report, and this report will be brought to the next Governance and Audit Committee meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe. I'm pleased to hear that you're confident that that the year's been okay. I'm just trying to get my head around which is there how many areas have been bumped on into 21-22. I see reference to homelessness. I know obviously the work is being undertaken also by the scrutiny committee on that, and I think Audit Wales are also doing work too. I'm just checking how that's going to go. I just wanted to clarify a status on contract and commissioning follow-up, which says status. It's the it's got a page number, and it's the last but one page, and it says not undertaken at request of Chief Officer. I just thought that looked like an unusual description for an update on an audit status, that somebody said don't do it. So I just wonder if you haven't that's unpacked. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that one is, it was at the request of the Director of Social Services, but obviously at the time that service area was under intense pressure with COVID. So we will follow it up, but that will be in the 2021-22 plan. The statuses will be a little more clearer in the final annual report that you'll get at the next meeting. It'll clearly show which ones are ongoing and have yet to form an opinion. Therefore, the opinion will be in 21-22, and it'll show the ones then that haven't started but have been considered in the 21-22 plan and will be picked up. So it'll be very clear which ones will be picked up and which ones have been deferred and won't be due to the risk assessment carry forward. But you are right with homelessness, that will stay on the plan, but we will link in with the scrutiny committee and the work ongoing to see if there's a role for audit as that work progressed with the task and finish group.
Thanks for that, Joe. Just quickly, Chair, we did talk earlier about a lot of the regulatory recommendations related to SRS. I'm just wondering if you also give an explanation on the undertaking service-specific compliance reviews and things not being undertaken. Just so that could be unpacked as well. Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, certainly. We did a piece of work on SRS joint service. We did the standard financial and governance control work that we do to go alongside the accounts. So that was done right at the beginning of April 2020. As you can see, we did have a review on there for a service specific area, but because what Tom touched on earlier, that service, they were under intense pressure, similar to social services. There will be days on the plan due to our risk assessment, and we will pick it up in 21-22. As in regard to which specific area that'll be, that's in we're still looking at that, but that will be detailed out as the year goes on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up something that actually was raised by Councillor Johnson. I think it's a good point that Councillor Johnson raised here, is that really I'm concerned about any officer, irrespective of any seniority, intervening in anything that's to do with audit. And I think anything should go to the corporate management team if something wants to be looked at. Because I do think there's a bit of a conflict of interest there, because I'm not saying anything is wrong, but equally, we should be reassured that, there shouldn't be unwarranted interference in an area that person's responsible for. And I think clearly that is something that does need to be looked at going forward by the corporate management team. I'd be grateful for your thoughts about that, Mark, in particular.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, obviously, stating the obvious, this has been an exceptional year, to put it mildly. Normally, yes, we don't. It can be circumstances when we get asked to defer audits because of exceptional circumstances, but it's probably happened more this year, understandably, than it's ever happened before. And I know when we discussed the plan at the start of the year, we knew we would have to be flexible because of the circumstances. But you are right to flag up that, you know, it's not for any officer really to be able to, you know, determine if an audit is done or not. But given the circumstances, we have had to take into account the pressures on different services because, you know, reality is it's been the priority has had to be to keep services on an even keel and able to provide the services to the public. So it's that definite balancing act. If there was something really untoward and we felt that we had to undertake it, any particular audit, then we would do that and obviously refer to more senior officers or corporate management team if necessary. But on the small number of examples that we've been asked to defer things, we felt it was reasonable. And a similar thing has happened in other authorities as well, and it's tended to have been the same sort of service areas in all fairness. But the point you make is valid, and certainly in a normal year, then it just wouldn't happen. Certainly not there's been a significant number, but it has happened more than it usually does. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just want to respond. I think, yes, you are quite right. This has been an exceptional year, and I know that officers have particularly been under pressure, especially in the executive sections where delivering of grants and, you know, and help. And in some ways, they've been very, very efficient. But, you know, that means that we must have degrees of controls, especially since it's public money. Even if it's not the council's public money, it's somebody else's taxpayers' public money. So it's something that is important, and we do need to be looking at that going forward. Yes, it's very easy when you start delivering grants to not do the required checks, but sometimes we need to perhaps revisit those to make sure the money is being spent correctly. And I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it is those. And I think that's something that we do need to be looking at going forward on COVID expenditure, and to make sure it's really helped the people it said it's helping out. Because certainly you read anecdotally about, I'm not talking about the national UK situation here, of grants being misapplied or misappropriated. And I think certainly, you know, I'm not saying this is going on in the Vale, far from it, but it might be, and I wouldn't know. So it's something that, you know, I'm sure Audit are looking at, and not just in terms of the audit in the Vale, but also in the wider world of audit. And I wondered, perhaps, Mark, are you going to be doing some sort of investigation on that just going forward?
Yes, certainly. We've already undertaken some work, and we were involved in trying to make sure that the appropriate controls were put in at the outset when, you know, the grants were initially put forward. Last March, April time. So I'm as confident as we can be that reasonable controls were put in place at that time. In addition to that, the National Fraud Initiative is undertaking a piece of work on all grant payments that have been made by authorities, or data matching exercise to identify any potential fraud, like a post-payment sort of review. So that will feed into the exercise as well, and obviously anything that needs to be referred to anywhere else, if we do find anything untoward, will be undertaken. But at the moment, I'm not aware of any particular issues. We also undertook some other data matching exercise through an organisation called CIFAS, and again didn't find any issues of concern for payments that had been made by the Vale of Glamorgan. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? I think not. So if we note the report and the progress made and move on to the forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair. That's me again. Yeah, obviously this is the usual report that the committee receives in terms of the forward programme for the forthcoming year. Just in the executive summary there, in order to assist the committee in ensuring the due considerations being given by the committee to all aspects of their core functions, the forward work programme appended to this report at Appendix A has been produced and is aligned to the committee's terms of reference. The forward work programme will need to be updated to reflect changes required due to the Local Government and Elections Act, as we've discussed earlier. The committee is asked to note the forward work programme to indicate whether any additional information is required, but references are already made to the complaints being included on the forward work programme. The performance elements need a bit more discussion and debate then internally in terms of the timing of some of those things, when it's appropriate to include those items on the forward work programme, so hence they are not there currently. The other point I wanted to make in terms of the items coming to the July committee, this committee, the one we had tonight, was moved. It was going to be held in June, so there was some items programmed in for this meeting which basically weren't going to be ready when the meeting date was changed. So a number of items have been deferred to the July meeting, but you can see that in paragraph or the table under paragraph 2.4. And I think that's all I needed to say really, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have Councillor Johnson?
It's not so much a question for Mark, more a scheduling issue, that I believe that 19th of July might be a Barry Town full council date, which impacts a number of members of this committee.
Okay. Right. Thank you. We'll see what we can do. Right.
Would we potentially look at an alternative there, Mark?
Yeah, certainly we can obviously liaise with Gareth and other key officers. I think the issue was to do with the timing of the draft accounts as well. So there's a few things that affect in when that meeting was going to be held. But certainly we can have a conversation and see what can be done.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I beg you for my impertinence, Councillor Carroll, but have you considered perhaps making the meeting a bit earlier? Because it does seem to be quite a heavy agenda for the next meeting, given the fact there are 3 reports going to come to the 19th July, as well as the statement of accounts and other things, which I know, as we all know through experience, can take a long time. So perhaps, I don't know what other members' views about that, and I don't know your own view about that, because you're the chair. It's up to you to decide what time, when we meet and whatever, and also looking at dates. And again, it's up to you. On the other thing that you could consider, I'm going to make myself very unpopular now with everybody about another meeting, because I also know that if you don't give enough time, things get washed through on the nods. And I think this has been a good meeting in the sense of we've had just a wide number of agenda items. But I know if we have a heavy agenda, and it costs whatever, and we've spread a few trees, it is an issue. So I mean, it's obviously up to you, Councillor Carroll, and what you decide you do.
Let's take a look. I'd need to check which day of the week the 19th was, if I'm being honest, Councillor Wilson, before committing on that. But we'll take a look and we'll find something that will do our best, at least, to accommodate everybody, if not most members. Do you want to come back in on that, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you very much. I mean, obviously that depends upon your diary and other members' diaries as well. I quite understand.
I'll do my best to accommodate it. And there being no further questions or comments, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and I'll see you all. Well, I'll see you all before the next meeting, I'm sure, apart from Paul, and have a good one.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair. See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.